10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 354. Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is episode 354, and we are starting a new series for the month of April. This one is going to be all about approaching and beginning with odd time signatures. Some things you can do to just get you started down the path and stop being so intimidated, as so many of us are, including myself, by odd time signatures. And we're going to start with something interesting, which is we're going to start with some non-odd time signatures and talk about some exercises that we can do that will get us ready for when we start to actually look at some of these time signatures like 5/4, 7/4, things like that. But before we jump into the show, just wanted to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast, which means we rely on people just like you to keep the show coming out. And we do that in the form of a small monthly donation. In return for that donation, you do get PDFs and audio examples that go along with every episode. And when you sign up to become a supporter, you get access to every single episode that we have ever done, all 354 of them. We do that through the Patreon platform, so you can do two things. You could go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners and get yourself signed up, or you can go to patreon.com and search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Get yourself signed up and you get instant access to all of that stuff. Wanted to give a quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Sharon, Ayani, Eric, and Aurelian. Thank you so much for joining up. I hope you're enjoying all of those jazz education materials that are housed over there. And to everybody else that's been supporting us for months or years, thank you. We could not do this without you. So 10minutejazzlesson.com, Patreon banner, or patreon.com. Search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So one thing that I think about that comes to mind almost immediately when I'm thinking about odd time signatures, and even before I could actually do anything meaningful over them, was I had some idea that odd time signatures are kind of based on groupings. And that's what makes them so interesting, is that if you think about 5/4, you've got a couple different ways that you can approach that. So one of the first things that we could do is we could group 3 and then 2. Or we could reverse that and group 2 and then 3. And a lot of the times, that's the way that odd time signatures come across. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can hear there's a big difference there. One of them is very easy to get lost, very easy to get turned around, and the other one has a little bit of a pattern to it. Now we could reverse that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one of the biggest things about playing in odd time signatures is to sort of understand groupings and understand that they will be uneven. The nature of an odd time signature is that it's not even. Now, as the number on top of the time signature gets higher, the groupings have more possibilities. So like 7/4, for example. Well, we could do 4 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's a very common one, but we could do it in a different way as well. We could do a 3 and 2 groupings of 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's one of the reasons that jazz composers love to use odd time signatures, because there's so many possibilities, right? And as we get further and further along in music in general, I think more emphasis is being placed on the rhythm because it is literally limitless, as opposed to harmony, which, we've been using the same 12-note scale in Western music for a long time at this point. So a lot of people are starting to develop these explorations of rhythm. And I think more and more as we move into the future, that is going to be the way to keep the music sounding fresh and new and endearing. So I think this is a really worthwhile thing to pursue for all of us. And my goal is to just get you started, right? Get you comfortable with the idea. So as I mentioned, what we're going to do today is we're going to deal with two even time signatures, but we're going to think about groupings. So we're going to deal with 4/4 and 12/8. And we're going to come up with a couple of exercises that are going to help us to develop some flexibility over these two very common time signatures before we move into the more complicated odd time signatures. This is just going to get us comfortable with the idea. So I want you to take out your PDF and I want you to look at the first example, and you're going to notice that it's in 4/4. And what I've done is I've written out a bunch of claves, and these happen to come from Brazilian music. They're known as the son clave and the rumba clave, and a couple of different variations of each of those. And what you will notice is that the groupings are not even. So if we take the first two measures, for example, this is what's known as a 3/2 clave. And in the first measure, we have 3 notes. So automatically we see that that doesn't line up perfectly symmetrically with a measure of 4/4. We're putting 3 notes in various places. And then in the second measure, we have 2 notes, right? And this is a clave that's probably going to be very, very familiar to all of you. Dot, 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 dot. And then our second clave takes that idea and it moves the last note of the first measure over by a half of a beat, resulting in a very, very different effect. Dot, 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 dot. And then on our second line, we have a 2/3 clave in both of those variations. You could do a little bit of research on what these claves are called. In fact, I highly suggest that because they're really important. And then what we have in the third line are not claves, but just these repeating rhythmic patterns that don't line up on the beat every time and provide us with different lengths of notes in various places. So if you look at line 3, first 2 measures, we have a dotted quarter, followed by another dotted quarter, followed by a quarter. So what we're doing is we're taking a very common time signature, but we're placing things in a way that's going to help us to develop this flexibility. So line 3, first 2 measures, dot, 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So in effect, what we're doing is we're practicing a 3/3/2 grouping. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then if you look at the last 2 measures of the first exercise, we're doing a dotted quarter note followed by a quarter note followed by a dotted quarter note. So we move that quarter note somewhere else in the bar. Now we're doing 3 2 3. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So this is going to be great. If you can get through this exercise with that flexibility, switching the pattern every couple of bars, every 4 bars, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable when we start to talk about these more complicated groupings in odd time signatures. So here's what the entire first exercise sounds like. Dot, 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 da 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 da. So I think you would agree that if you could do that minimum really solidly, you'd be well on your way to more rhythmic flexibility, and you'd probably be ready for a new challenge after that. All right, now I want to talk about another really common time signature, which is 12/8. And this gives us a little bit more control over the division of the beats, because when we think about 12/8, we're dividing each beat into 3 sub beats. We're subdividing them into 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Dot, 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 dot. And that's really good, especially for swing music, because that underlying eighth note triplet is always there in swing, right? So what I've done is I've provided 4 exercises for you in 12/8. And these are going to be a little bit more challenging. Remember that the subdivision actually looks different. 12/8 looks different than 4/4, which is also going to be a really, really good thing to work on, because a lot of these odd time signatures, 7/8, 9/8, 6/8, all these things, they are going to look a lot different. And that's one of the big challenges for playing some of this music is honestly just the way it looks, getting past that unfamiliar feeling of looking at these different groupings. So 12/8 is going to still provide you with more flexibility if you can do this 4-part exercise. And it's also going to give you an idea of how different it looks when that 8 is on the bottom, which is a really common thing. So let's check out what this 12/8 exercise sounds like. And I'm going to be including these for our $5 patrons so that you can sing along with them and test yourself. But here's the 12/8 exercise from this week's PDF. Da 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 da. And if that's way too hard for you right now, that's okay. Stick with the 4/4 for now, but eventually move on to developing that flexibility in 12/8 as well. Okay, so these are just going to be really good exercises for you where you're going to start to place the notes in different parts of the beats. You're going to start doing these uneven groupings. And then next time we will talk about actual odd time signatures and how we can get started with that. But please don't overlook these exercises. Be like, oh, I clicked on this podcast because I wanted to start working on odd time signatures, and you're having me work on even time signatures. Well, you got to start somewhere. And if you can't do these 2 exercises, I would argue you're not ready to move on to the odd time signatures. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Remember to ask me any questions if you have them. If you want the PDF, which I highly recommend for everybody, go over to patreon.com, search for the 10-minute jazz lesson, and you can get your hands on that stuff immediately, along with the entire archive of everything we've ever put out. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week with another brand new episode. Hope you're all doing well out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.